Hi, hello, how are you? My name is Sarah from Sarah's Reading Nook, and today is a good day. So grab yourself a cup, a mug, a snack, a cat, if I can find her, or if she can find me. Last I saw, she was sleeping. And let's discuss how reading tastes change over time. So if you're new here, me and my cat Olivia, we make videos and we post them every Wednesday and Sunday. And sometimes we post more videos per week, as we are doing now during Bookish Planuary, which is a series of planning videos that I have related to reading goals between January 3rd to the 23rd. So we only have a couple more days left. All right, and now let's get into the video. So in today's video, I really want to talk about 10 ways that I have noticed personally that my reading tastes have changed over time. Dare I say, evolved over time? And who here, actually, raise your hand if you have ever noticed changing your reading tastes. Putting yourself into one box and then realizing that maybe you want to step outside of it. Go through those lines and step into unforeseen areas. And I sure have noticed that, especially since I've been reading ever since I could read. So let's get into 10 ways that I have discovered my reading taste changing over time. So number 10, popular books aren't necessarily my favorite books anymore. I think that there is nothing wrong with gravitating towards popular books. And I'm not necessarily saying that I don't enjoy popular books. But being in the bookish community, I have really noticed that similar books keep popping up and up again. And sometimes when I see a large amount of readers sort of gravitating towards certain books, initially, you get kind of interested and excited about it. But through the years, I've sort of noticed that I need to be a bit more careful with that. Because just because others enjoy a book, or because it gets a lot of publishing, like airtime, that really does not mean that I will enjoy the book. So over time, I have really noticed gravitating towards books that might be less popular. In doing that, I've actually noticed my reading tastes and my reading preferences because they are more directed by myself than outside influences, perhaps, or mass influences. I'm really enjoying my books more. My ratings are higher. I complete more books than ever. So yeah, let me know if any of you have noticed a similar phenomenon going on. And if so, how do you know if you are going to probably enjoy a popular book? I would love to have some guidance in that area. Okay, so next, I have noticed that historically speaking, I have enjoyed smaller books or shorter books. And I think that in the past I've done that because I want to hit my reading goals. But I'm currently reading this memoir by Barack Obama, and I'm at about 74, 77, almost 80%, somewhere around there. That's a large range. But I am getting closer to completion. And Mr. Obama, his book is 706 pages, which perhaps it might not be very long to you, but it's long for me. Okay, and this book, it's 814 pages, A Little Life. And now if you've seen my favorites of 2020 video, you'll know that I raved about this book, and this was actually my favorite book of 2020, or that I read in 2020. And this one, it's gonna be hard for me to find a better book than this in 2021. I'm just saying. Perhaps big books intimidate me a little bit. It takes perseverance, especially if, like me, who else is a slow reader? Because I am a slow reader. So I have to kind of pep myself up before reading it, because you could get 600 pages into an 800-page book and have the last 200-300 pages not do it for you at all. But I am getting a little braver, I think, and I am starting to read bigger books. And that might affect what my reading statistics are, but if I can find gems like those 2 books, I definitely think it is worth it. So the next point is that I'm finding that I am reading more graphic novels instead of comics. Now, you might be thinking that's the same thing. And I will have to do my own research on this, but I grew up reading Archie comics, Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield, and so to me, those are comics. Short, little story. But I'm starting to like graphic novels more, which is more like The Prince and The Dressmaker, where you have a story that's told in like 200-300 pages, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And it's basically a full story with images. But I'm finding myself gravitate towards graphic novels more. And perhaps that is because I'm wanting a little bit more substance, and can allow myself more time, to read a story. When I was younger, it was all about comics, and now it's all about graphic novels. So the next point. So to poetry lovers out there, I am so sorry, but I used to dislike poetry, like actively dislike it. To the point where I would say, why does anyone read poetry? It doesn't make any sense. Well, that was old Sarah. And I don't know if it was because I just could not find a poet that resonated with me, but in around 2015, I started to read poetry, and I started to branch out reading Rupi Kaur, Amanda Lovelace, a lot of female poets. And I started to read poetry books that actually spoke to me. It wasn't this philosophical, metaphorical, existential, I understood what the poems said. So I kept reading poetry and getting more into it and finding, more poets that I actually enjoyed. And I even saw Rupi Kaur live a couple of years ago, and she was brilliant. And last year, I kid you not, my most read genre was poetry. And that blew my mind because that would have never happened ever before. 2014 Sarah would be like, you have to be kidding me. Poetry, really? I think that you just have to find the right poems that connect with you, that really speak to your soul. And just to give a few recommendations, of course, Rupi Kaur, Amanda Lovelace, Rudy Francisco, those are just some of my favorites. And I recommend you check all of them out. Do you like poetry? I would love to hear your poetry recommendations. So next point is on rereading books. Now, I still reread books a fair amount of time, but this year I am branching out of the rereads. I'm pushing back just a little bit. There are seasonal rereads that I do, and I talk all about my rereading habits in my rereading books tag. Forget exactly what it's called, but I'm going to have it up here. And I'm sort of stepping back just a little bit this year, just so that I can experiment and see how can I function reading more unknown books to me. Books that are on my shelf that I haven't got into, books from genres I haven't read before. And I'll be honest, that scares me a little bit because I find so much emotional comfort from rereading books. I read A Christmas Carol every December, or at least I try to. Oh my gosh, and Dickens. But I'm gonna put it off just for a little bit this year, as long as I can, to see if I can make space for new books. And so let me know, are you a rereader? And do you have seasonal rereads that you enjoy doing? Seasonal rereads are kind of the best. Okay, so the next point is that I am more confident than ever in the books that I select. So over time, I suppose there is this constant filtering we do of our book tastes. The more we reflect on books that we have read, the more, I guess, specific you can be towards your book interests and actually name, categorize them, identify them. And also, when you are exposed to various authors, you are likely to find some authors that you probably would want to read again and again. And I think that's what's been happening over time. Now I think I am a little bit better at identifying them for myself and also identifying what book recommendations that others suggest to me that I will enjoy. And from there, synthesize what I will likely like. And so it's amazing. It's allowing your brain to go through an algorithm. And based on certain criteria that you have identified through your reading habits, you're able to select whether or not you choose to take what that other person is recommending you. And I think that I've been dissecting that more. And I do really treasure others and their recommendations. And I love bookish recommendations. And I actually couldn't hear enough of them because the more I hear recommendations, which I love to hear from others, the more data I have to analyze. And from there, I think that has kind of been successful over the years. And especially on BookTube, because I've been exposed to so many others. So yeah, let me know if you have been able to identify books that you will probably like based off of others' recommendations. I would love to know. So the next point is something that maybe younger Sarah would be sad to hear. But I find myself becoming less attracted to fantasy reading material than I thought I would be. I used to love reading fantasy when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, when I was a college student. But reading in college was difficult to do with all of those textbook readings that we had to do in papers. And I don't quite know what it is. Okay. And it likely is that I just am not able to identify the type of fantasy that I'm into now, but I have gravitated away from it. And I know that that's not inherently a bad thing, and I am not ranting on fantasy because I look back at fantasy with nothing but love and appreciation for the books that I really enjoyed as a kid. But I'm kind of parting ways from it, and I don't quite understand what that's about. So this one is kind of a bittersweet reading taste change, and I almost feel like I want to fix it and find some good fantasy books. But I've just sort of, made room for other books to prioritize on my TBR. And I am enjoying reading more diverse contemporaries and nonfictions, which is the complete opposite of fantasy. I will try again because who knows, I may find something that I really, really enjoy. So the next point, I have really discovered that I not just like reading books that have been translated into English, but I'm finding that I really enjoy reading books in their native language from the authors. I can only do that with Portuguese and French and kind of Spanish, but I have been reading Portuguese books by Portuguese authors, and I am slowly attempting to read Paulo Coelho and Saramago over time. There's something really special about reading a book that is written in a different language, in that native language, versus reading a translation, because a lot of the meaning can be lost. And there are a lot of beautiful and lovely phrases that are in Portuguese and in French, and they're just so beautiful to read in that language. Whereas sometimes the translation can be a little clunky when it should be more delicate, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I've really enjoyed reading books in their native language as much as I possibly can. And I've been doing that more so in the last few years, the better that I am getting at my reading comprehension in Portuguese and French. Okay, so the next point is that I really crave reading and understanding and analyzing social contemporary issues more so than before. And okay, so I'm gonna go back. When I was doing my medical education, I remember that we used to have sort of more cultural issues incorporated into our curriculum. And this has branched out into so many different issues affecting individuals, minorities, different cultures, etc. And so I have just wanted to understand that more so that I can be better as an individual in my society, and I can identify ways in which I can learn to listen and also learn to help out and speak up when I can. You'll see that in my TBRs, my January TBR, and specifically in my 2021 TBR and my reading goals, that interest has just dominated my reading. And yeah, let me know if you are interested in nonfiction, contemporaries, or fiction that dives into social justice issues, political issues. I would love to hear any recommendations that you have. Okay, and the last point is kind of a big one, but I noticed that when I was younger, and this changed around university, around that time, I noticed that I have been gravitating towards standalones much more than series. I suspect that I know why that is. And some of the reasons are just more practical issues than they are content issues. One of my biggest issues is that when I read a series, I have to chase down the follow-up. And sometimes it has happened where the follow-up book doesn't even come out. And that has panicked me at times. Now, contrast that with a standalone. You have this standalone book and you read it, and that is the story. And when you leave that book, you have a sense of, or you should have, a sense of completion when you're done. And I like that feeling of just stopping a book, and feeling a sense of closure with it. Now, when I was younger, I don't know what it is, but I used to love books that would just keep going and going. And I think that's because I used to think that when you really enjoy a book, you can never get enough of it. But I have learned over time that there are definitely times when the book needs to stop, or the manga needs to stop, or branching out into movies, where there are movies that should have stopped in number 1. And it's actually become sort of an annoyance for me. This is an anime reference, but oh my gosh, Naruto, which went on and on and on. And they should have just nipped it in the bud way earlier, Personal opinion. And I guess I get a little frustrated because I think, is this just a way to cash in? So sometimes series have left me underwhelmed, but others I have really enjoyed. For instance, the Robert Langdon series. I have enjoyed the majority of that series, though it became a little formulaic after book 2 or 3. But yeah, I have definitely noticed a change. Are you a series person? Are you a standalone person? I mean, a standalone book person. I don't mean standing alone, But that's okay too. But yeah, that is a massive change. And I think that is something that I wouldn't necessarily have identified or been able to accept earlier on in my life. So those are 10 ways that I have noticed my reading taste changing over time. And I would love to know how your reading tastes have changed over time as well. So if you've noticed anything, please leave a comment down below, and I would love to hear that. So I'm going to wrap this up by chatting about Bookish Planuary. Subscribe if you are interested in our channel. We would love to have you here. Bookish Planuary will be wrapping up on the 23rd. We still have 2 videos to go over what our favorite productivity apps are that help with reading. And my final one, which is going to be Storygraph versus Goodreads. I have a lot to say. Anyhow, that is everything for today. I'm going to check on Olivia, give her a little treat. She's probably snoozing like a sleepy cat. Bye!